My husband's first wife died of cancer 8 years before we met. He kept her photo in his wallet, visited her grave on their anniversary, and sometimes cried in his sleep whispering her name. I held him through those nights, grateful that he had chosen to love again after such devastating loss. I thought I was helping him heal. Then I saw her standing in line at a coffee shop in Seattle, very much alive, wearing a wedding ring that matched the one on my husband's finger. My name is Sutton, and for 4 years I believed I was married to a widower named Ethan who had tragically lost his first wife Rebecca to ovarian cancer at the age of 31. He told me the story on our third date, tears streaming down his face as he described watching the woman he loved waste away over 18 months of chemotherapy, radiation, and false hope. He told me about holding her hand when she took her last breath, about the eulogy he couldn't finish because he was crying too hard, about the year he spent afterward unable to get out of bed. I fell in love with him that night, not despite his grief but because of it. A man who could love that deeply, who could mourn that completely, was a man capable of the kind of devotion I had always dreamed of finding. I didn't know that every word was a lie. I didn't know that Rebecca was alive and well, and living 45 minutes away in the house they still shared together. I met Ethan at a mutual friend's birthday party in June 2019. I was 32 years old, working as a pediatric nurse at a children's hospital, and I had recently ended a 2-year relationship with a man who couldn't commit to anything more serious than which Netflix show to watch next. I wasn't looking for love that night. I was looking for free wine and an excuse to wear the dress I had bought on sale 3 months earlier. But then Ethan walked up to me at the bar and asked what I was drinking, and something in his smile made me forget every reason I had for being cynical about romance. He was handsome in a classic way, with dark hair going silver at the temples and blue eyes that seemed to hold secrets and sorrows I wanted to understand. By the end of the night, I had given him my number. By the end of the month, I was falling for him so hard that I forgot to be careful. The dead wife story came out on August 14, 2019, our third official date. We were sitting on a bench in the park near my apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, when I asked him about his past relationships. He went quiet for a long moment. Then he told me about Rebecca. They had met in college, married at 24, spent 7 perfect years building a life together before the diagnosis came. Ovarian cancer stage 3, aggressive and unforgiving. He described the treatments that didn't work, the hope that slowly faded, the hospice bed they set up in their living room because she wanted to die at home. He told me she passed away on March 15, 2011, exactly 8 years before we met. The date was specific. The details were vivid. The tears were real, or so convincing that I couldn't tell the difference. I held his hand and told him how sorry I was. I told him he was brave for opening his heart again. I told him I would never try to replace her, but I would be honored to stand beside him as he continued to heal. What I didn't know was that Rebecca wasn't dead. She was very much alive, living in the same house she and Ethan had bought in 2008, working as an accountant at a firm downtown, and apparently blissfully unaware that her husband had been telling women she had died of cancer for nearly a decade. I wouldn't learn any of this until 4 years later. 4 years of marriage. 4 years of loving a man who had invented a dead wife to explain why he could only see me on certain days, why he couldn't spend holidays with my family, why he always had to leave by 10 p.m. no matter what we were doing. I thought he was honoring Rebecca's memory by visiting her grave on special occasions. He was actually going home to her. The lies were so elaborate that I never thought to question them. Ethan explained that he worked as a consultant for a tech company, which required him to travel frequently and keep irregular hours. This justified why he could never stay overnight during the week, why our dates were always scheduled days in advance, why spontaneous plans were almost impossible. He said he had sold the house he shared with Rebecca because the memories were too painful, and now lived in an apartment downtown that he described in enough detail that I could picture it perfectly even though I never actually saw it. When I asked to visit, he said he was embarrassed by how sparse it was, that he had never really learned to make a place feel like home after Rebecca died. The excuse seemed reasonable at the time. A grieving widower who couldn't bring himself to decorate. A man still living in emotional limbo between his past and his future. I filled in the gaps with my own assumptions and never pushed for more. We got engaged on Valentine's Day 2020, 10 months after we met. Ethan proposed in the restaurant where we had our first real date, getting down on one knee while the other diners applauded and I cried with joy. The ring was a 1.5-carat diamond that he said had been his grandmother's, passed down through generations, waiting for the right woman. I didn't learn until much later that he had bought it at a pawn shop 2 weeks earlier for $2,400 charged to a credit card in a name I didn't recognize. Everything about our relationship was built on a foundation of deception, so complete that I couldn't see the cracks, even when I was standing directly on top of them. The wedding was small, held in March 2020 just before the pandemic shut everything down. Only 30 guests, mostly my family and friends since Ethan claimed to be estranged from his relatives after they blamed him for not saving Rebecca somehow. The story made sense at the time. Grief does strange things to families. People look for someone to blame when tragedy strikes. I didn't question why no one from his past attended our wedding. I didn't question why he insisted on handling all the paperwork himself, saying he wanted to spare me the bureaucratic headache. I didn't question why we never went on a proper honeymoon, why he couldn't take more than 3 days off in a row, why our life together always seemed to exist in small, carefully scheduled windows of time. I trusted him. I loved him. I believed that the man who had lost so much would never do anything to hurt the woman who was helping him live again. Our married life settled into a pattern that I accepted as normal. Ethan would stay with me 3 or 4 nights a week, always arriving after dinner and leaving before breakfast, claiming early meetings or late flights or the insomnia that plagued him since Rebecca's death. On weekends we would spend more time together, but even then there were gaps, hours when he had to work, or clear his head or handle something for a client. I missed him constantly, ached for more of him, but I told myself this was just who he was. A man scarred by loss. A man who needed space to process his trauma. A man who was doing his best to build a new life while still carrying the weight of the old one. I was patient. I was understanding. I was a fool. The cracks started to appear in our 3rd year of marriage. Small things at first. A receipt in his pocket from a restaurant I didn't recognize on a night he said he was working late. A phone call he stepped outside to take, coming back with an excuse about a demanding client. A text message notification I glimpsed before he swiped it away, just a name. R. And the beginning of a sentence I couldn't read. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that a man who had been so honest about his painful past would never lie about something smaller. I told myself that questioning him would be an insult to everything we had built together. But the doubt had taken root, and once doubt begins to grow, it's almost impossible to stop. The day everything changed was September 23, 2023. I was in Seattle for a nursing conference, 3 hours from home, staying at a hotel near the convention center. The morning session had been canceled due to a speaker emergency, so I decided to walk to a coffee shop a few blocks away to kill time before lunch. The place was crowded, the line stretching almost to the door, and I was scrolling through my phone when I looked up and saw her. Dark hair, mid-30s, attractive in a polished professional way. She was ordering at the counter, laughing at something the barista said, completely ordinary in every way except for the wedding ring on her left hand. A platinum band with a distinctive twisted design that I recognized immediately, because I had spent hours staring at the identical ring on Ethan's finger. I had asked him about it once early in our relationship, and he told me it was his wedding band from Rebecca, that he couldn't bring himself to stop wearing it. I thought it was sweet. I thought it showed devotion. I thought a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. I didn't approach her right away. I couldn't. My legs had stopped working, my brain had stopped processing. My entire body had frozen in the middle of that coffee shop, while the world continued to move around me. I watched her collect her drink, watched her sit down at a table by the window, watched her pull out a laptop and begin typing like nothing was wrong, like my entire life wasn't collapsing 3 feet away from her. She didn't know I existed. She didn't know that the ring on her finger was supposed to belong to a dead woman. She didn't know that her husband had been married to someone else for nearly 4 years while presumably still living with her, still sharing a bed with her, still wearing a matching ring and pretending that I was the only wife in his life. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes maybe. Maybe longer. Eventually someone bumped into me from behind, apologized, and the contact shocked me back into my body. I walked to the counter on autopilot, ordered a coffee I didn't want, and found a seat where I could watch her without being obvious about it. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album where I kept pictures of Ethan and me, scrolling until I found one where his ring was visible. I zoomed in. I compared it to the ring on the woman's finger across the room. Identical. The same twisted platinum design. The same distinctive pattern. The same ring that belonged to a dead woman who was currently alive and drinking a latte and typing on her laptop like any other ordinary morning. The rational part of my brain tried to offer explanations. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the ring design wasn't as unique as I thought. Maybe this woman had bought a similar ring somewhere and it meant nothing. But I knew. In that place beneath logic and reason where truth lives, I knew. I knew the way you know when someone you love has been lying to you. When the puzzle pieces that never quite fit suddenly snap together into a picture you didn't want to see. Ethan's limited availability. His insistence on controlling our schedule. The apartment I had never visited. The family that never came to our wedding. The grave he visited on March 15th every year. Supposedly the anniversary of Rebecca's death. He wasn't mourning at a cemetery. He was probably spending the day with his other wife, celebrating some milestone I knew nothing about while I sat at home feeling sorry for his grief. I knew I should confront her. I knew I should walk over, introduce myself, shatter her world the way mine had just been shattered. But I couldn't do it. Not there, not then, not without knowing more. I needed evidence. I needed facts. I needed to understand the full scope of what Ethan had done before I could decide what to do next. So I did something I'm not proud of. I followed her. When she packed up her laptop and left the coffee shop, I left too. When she walked to a parking garage 3 blocks away, I walked behind her at a distance. When she got into a silver Toyota Camry with a license plate I memorized immediately, I got into a taxi and told the driver to follow her. The driver looked at me like I was crazy. Probably was. But I needed to know where she was going. I needed to know where my husband's other life was hiding. The house was a craftsman-style bungalow in a quiet neighborhood 45 minutes from the coffee shop. It had a manicured lawn, a front porch with 2 rocking chairs, and a mailbox with a name I couldn't read from the street. The silver Camry pulled into the driveway and the woman got out, grabbed her bag and walked inside like she had done it 1,000 times before. Because she had. Because she lived there. Because this was the home she shared with my husband, the home where Rebecca had supposedly died 8 years ago but had actually been living all along. I sat in the taxi watching the house, this ordinary house in this ordinary neighborhood, and I felt something break inside me that I don't think will ever fully heal. I paid the taxi driver 3 times the fare to wait while I walked to the mailbox. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, carrying me forward against my will. The name on the mailbox was Hayes. Ethan Hayes. My husband's name. Our name. Except here it wasn't our name. Here it was his and Rebecca's, the way it had apparently been for the past 15 years of their marriage. The marriage that never ended. The wife who never died. The life that continued parallel to mine, hidden behind lies so elaborate that I had never thought to question them. I took a photo of the mailbox. I took a photo of the house. I took a photo of the silver Camry in the driveway. Then I got back in the taxi and asked the driver to take me to my hotel, where I locked myself in my room and cried until I couldn't breathe. The next 3 days were a blur of investigation and devastation. I hired a private investigator that same night, a woman named Diana Chun who specialized in infidelity cases and had heard every version of this story before. I told her what I knew, showed her the photos, gave her Ethan's name and the address of the house I had followed Rebecca to. She told me she would have preliminary findings within 72 hours. Those 72 hours were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of my conference, sat through sessions I couldn't focus on, smiled at colleagues who had no idea my marriage was imploding in real time. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't text him except for brief, normal responses to his messages asking how the conference was going. I played the role of unsuspecting wife while secretly documenting every lie he had ever told me. Diana's report arrived on September 26, 2023. 18 pages of evidence that confirmed everything I had already begun to suspect. Ethan Marcus Hayes had married Rebecca Ann Hayes on June 3, 2006, 17 years ago. They had never divorced. They had never separated. They had lived continuously at the same address I had followed her to, filed joint taxes every year, and maintained a marriage that by all legal and practical measures was alive and well. The woman I had seen at the coffee shop wasn't a ghost or a doppelganger or a strange coincidence. She was my husband's wife. His first wife. His real wife. I was the other woman, except I hadn't known I was the other woman. I had been tricked into becoming a mistress in my own marriage. The report also revealed financial details that made me sick. Ethan had opened credit cards in my name that I didn't know about, accumulated over $47,000 in debt that he was apparently using to maintain his double life. He had forged my signature on a loan application for $25,000 that he claimed was for home improvements on a home we didn't own. He had been slowly draining the joint savings account I had set up for our future, moving money into accounts I had no access to. For 4 years, while I worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital and came home to a husband who claimed to love me, he had been systematically defrauding me. I wasn't just a victim of emotional betrayal. I was a victim of financial crime. I was a victim who had signed a marriage certificate that wasn't legally worth the paper it was printed on, because Ethan was already married to someone else. I confronted him on September 29, 2023, 4 days after I saw Rebecca in the coffee shop. He came to my apartment expecting a normal evening, bringing flowers and the smile that I now recognized as the mask of a practiced liar. I let him in. I let him kiss me on the cheek. I let him sit down on the couch where we had watched movies and made love and talked about the future we were supposedly building together. Then I put Diana's report on the coffee table and asked him to explain why his dead wife was alive and living in a house 45 minutes from where we were sitting. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. The warmth drained from his eyes. The smile disappeared. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, I saw something cold and calculating behind the face I had loved for 4 years. Then the mask came back, softer this time, wounded instead of charming. He reached for my hand and started to explain. Rebecca was mentally ill, he said. She had threatened to hurt herself if he ever left her. He had been trapped in a toxic marriage for years, unable to escape without destroying her. I was the first real love he had experienced since the beginning, the first person who made him believe he could have a normal life. He was going to leave her, he said. He was going to tell me the truth, he said. He just needed more time, more patience, more understanding. The lies poured out of him so smoothly that I almost believed them. Almost. But I had seen the report. I had seen the credit cards and the loan and the 17 years of joint tax returns. Whatever story he was telling, it wasn't about a man trapped by a mentally ill wife. It was about a predator who had found an easy mark. I told him to get out. I told him I had hired a lawyer and was filing for an annulment, since our marriage wasn't legally valid anyway. I told him I was reporting the financial fraud to the police, and would pursue charges if he didn't return every dollar he had stolen from me. He tried to argue, tried to explain, tried to turn himself into the victim of circumstances beyond his control. I didn't listen. I couldn't listen. The voice that had whispered, "I love you," in my ear for 4 years was now just noise, meaningless sounds from a person I had never really known. When he finally left, I changed the locks on my apartment and sat on the floor crying until the sun came up. That was the last time I saw my husband. My fake husband. The man who had invented a dead wife to hide a living one. The annulment was granted in January 2024. The judge reviewed the evidence, the investigation report, the marriage certificate that Ethan had no legal right to sign, and declared our union void ab initio, as if it had never existed. In the eyes of the law, I had never been married. For years of my life, reduced to a legal technicality, erased like it meant nothing. But it had meant something to me. It had meant everything to me. And no judge's signature could change the fact that I had loved a man who had treated me like a placeholder, a convenience, a source of income and affection, while he maintained his real life somewhere else. I never contacted Rebecca directly. Part of me wanted to warn her about the man she was married to, wanted to compare notes on the lies he had told us both. But Diana's investigation revealed that Rebecca almost certainly knew about me. Bank statements showed joint purchases around the time Ethan was supposedly taking me on dates. Phone records showed calls between them during evenings he claimed to be working late. Either Rebecca was willfully blind to her husband's double life, or she was complicit in it. Either way, I didn't know her anything. I had been victimized enough by that family. I wasn't going to volunteer for more. The financial recovery took longer than the emotional one, though both are still ongoing. The The police declined to press charges against Ethan, saying the evidence was complicated, and the case would be difficult to prosecute. My lawyer helped me dispute the fraudulent credit cards and eventually got most of the debt removed from my record. But the process took 8 months and cost me $12,000 in legal fees. The loan Ethan had taken out in my name went into default before I even knew it existed, damaging my credit score and requiring years of careful financial behavior to repair. He stole more than money from me. He stole my security, my stability, my ability to trust that the ground beneath my feet was solid. Ethan and Rebecca are still married as far as I know. Still living in that craftsman bungalow with the rocking chairs on the porch. Still filing joint taxes and maintaining the life they built together while he was simultaneously building one with me. I don't know if he's found another victim. Another woman with a kind heart and a willingness to believe sad stories about dead wives. I hope not. I hope the investigation I commissioned and the legal records from our annulment follow him forever, warning anyone who thinks to get close. But I know how charming he can be. I know how convincing his tears look. I know that somewhere out there might be another woman falling for a story about tragic loss and the courage to love again. I was that woman once. I hope I never meet her successor. The grief I feel isn't for Ethan. I don't miss him anymore, not the real him, not the person he actually turned out to be. The grief is for the version of him I fell in love with. The widower with the sad eyes and the beautiful ring and the story about holding his wife's hand when she died. That man didn't exist. He was a character Ethan created, a performance designed to disarm and manipulate and extract whatever he wanted from women foolish enough to believe him. I grieved for the fictional man the same way you grieve for a character in a book who dies at the end. Except this character didn't die. He simply revealed that he had never been real in the first place. Today I am 37 years old. Living in a new apartment in a new city, working at a hospital where nobody knows my history unless I choose to tell them. I go to therapy every other week to process the trauma of loving a lie. I have started dating again, tentatively, with guardrails and background checks and a level of caution that probably seems excessive to people who have never been deceived the way I was deceived. But I refuse to let Ethan's betrayal define my future. I refuse to become someone who can't love because one man abused my trust so completely. The version of me who stood in that coffee shop watching Rebecca order a latte is not the version of me who exists today. I am harder now, yes. More skeptical. Slower to trust and quicker to question. But I am also stronger. I survived something that could have destroyed me. I rebuilt a life that someone else tried to steal. That counts for something. That counts for a lot. If you are reading this and something feels wrong in your relationship, pay attention to that feeling. Pay attention to the partner who can never stay overnight, who controls the schedule, who has reasons why you can't meet their family or visit their home or integrate fully into their life. Pay attention to the sad stories that seem designed to generate sympathy and discourage questions. Pay attention to the rings and the receipts and the text messages that don't quite add up. I missed all of those signs because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. I wanted to believe that a man who had loved and lost could love again, that I could be the one who saved him from his grief. The fairy tale was a trap. The grief was a performance. And the only person who could save me was myself. Ethan's grave site doesn't exist. The cemetery he supposedly visited every March 15th to mourn Rebecca is real, but there's no Hayes plot there. I checked. I drove there myself after the annulment was finalized, walked through the rows of headstones looking for a name I knew I wouldn't find. I'm not sure why I did it. Closure maybe. Or proof that even the most specific details of his lies were fabricated. Rebecca's death date, the hospice bed, the eulogy he couldn't finish. All of it invented. The only real thing about his story was the sadness it made me feel. And I'm done feeling sad for a man who doesn't deserve my tears. My friends ask me sometimes how I didn't know. How I could live with someone for 4 years without realizing he had another life. Another wife. Another reality running parallel to mine. The truth is, I didn't live with him. I lived adjacent to him. I lived in the spaces he allowed me to occupy, the scheduled hours and planned dates and carefully controlled moments that he carved out from his real life. I never saw his apartment because it didn't exist. I never met his family because they would have known about Rebecca. I never surprised him with an unplanned visit because he had trained me to believe that predictability was consideration and spontaneity was disrespectful. The cage he built for me was made of my own assumptions, my own respect for his supposed grief, my own willingness to accommodate a man I thought was healing. I didn't know because I wasn't allowed to know. And I wasn't allowed to know because I never demanded access to the parts of his life he kept hidden. The wedding ring haunts me most. Not my ring, the engagement ring I returned to the pawn shop where he bought it, but his ring. The twisted platinum band he said was from his marriage to Rebecca. The one he couldn't bear to remove, because it reminded him of a love that death had taken too soon. That ring was real. That ring was from his marriage to Rebecca. He just failed to mention that the marriage was still ongoing, that the ring still meant what wedding rings are supposed to mean. He weaponized my compassion. He turned his refusal to remove his wedding ring into evidence of devotion, rather than evidence of commitment to another woman. Every time I looked at that ring and felt sympathy for his loss, he was silently laughing at my gullibility. Or maybe not laughing. Maybe he didn't think about me at all. Maybe I was just a game he was playing, a side quest in the video game of his life, not important enough to generate any emotion at all. I don't know what I would say to Rebecca if I ever met her again. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe I would ask her how she justified staying with a man who had defrauded another woman, who had committed bigamy, who had proven himself capable of lying every single day for 4 consecutive years. Maybe I would ask her if he ever told her about me, if they laughed about the nurse who was stupid enough to fall for the dead wife's story, if my heartbreak was entertainment for their dinner table conversations. Or maybe I would just walk away. Some questions don't have answers worth hearing. Some confrontations only extend the pain without providing resolution. Rebecca made her choices. I made mine. The only choice that matters now is the choice to move forward. The last thing I want to say is this: you can survive betrayal. I know it doesn't feel that way when you're in the middle of it. When every breath hurts and every memory is poison, and every plan you made for the future has turned to ash. I know it feels like the person you loved has killed something inside you that will never grow back. But it does grow back. Different than before, scarred and cautious and shaped by what happened, but it grows. I am proof of that. I am standing on the other side of something that should have destroyed me, and I am still here. Still capable of joy. Still capable of love. Still capable of imagining a future where this is just a story I tell. A terrible chapter in a book that has many more pages left to write. My name is Sutton. I was married to a man who invented a dead wife to hide a living one. I spent 4 years loving a lie and 18 months recovering from the truth. I am not the same person I was before. I am someone stronger. Someone wiser. Someone who knows that survival isn't just about enduring the worst moments of your life. It's about building something meaningful from the wreckage. Ethan took 4 years from me. He doesn't get a single day more. This is my story. This is my survival. And this is the last time I let him matter.